Thank you so much, Michelle and Martha. It was such a joy to work with both of you, and it was such a joy to hear your reflections. We're going to continue the conversation with Michelle and Martha now, and I'm going to invite Ailbhe Murphy, who is the Director of Create, to moderate this discussion. And we've got half an hour for this discussion, so Ailbhe, I'll come back visible with about 2 minutes to go, just so you know that then we're wrapping up towards the final Q&A. And so that everybody knows, the final Q&A is the last moment of the day where we're again going to try to have as many people visible as possible so that we can in some way end the day as together as possible. So I'll pass you over to Ailbhe, who will introduce the panel on mentorship and leadership.
Thank you very much, Jenny, and indeed thank you so much for the invitation to chair this panel. It's great to be part of the SoloSIRENs Symposium. I wasn't there this morning, but this afternoon has just been absolutely wonderful, so rich. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to distinguish myself by extending the time frame, because it's very impressive how you've kept to the time. Let's move on to the introductions. We have a fantastic panel here with us this afternoon on female mentorship and leadership. So I'll start by introducing Siobhan Burke, who's the co-director of the Irish Theatre Institute, Mary Moynihan, who is the artistic director of Smashing Times, Maria Fleming, general manager of the Dublin Theatre Festival. We're delighted that Michelle Henry, who you just saw on the video, the SoloSIRENs mentee and emerging director, as well as Martha Knight, also the SoloSIRENs mentee and emerging producer, will be part of our panel. Jenny Webster will be with us as well, which is fantastic, the producer of SoloSIRENs. And we're also joined by Imogen Gunner, a musician and composer who's currently working in the Department of Arts and Culture at Newcastle University. So I'd like to begin, if I could, just returning to this wonderful film that we have just seen, a very strong statement of the enthusiasm, energy, and critical thinking of the emerging practitioners in this field. And so if I could begin, Michelle and Martha, I mean, you covered so much in the film, but I think it would be really nice if you could revisit perhaps just from the question really of what was particularly distinctive for you about the mentorship of SoloSIRENs.
I think that was my first time seeing that video, so I think I have lots of fresh thoughts after it as well. I'm sure you're the same, Michelle, but something that really struck me there was how organic the mentorship was and how kind of ground up it was structurally. Something that was really distinct was the focus on us as people and the focus on us as people with our own context and our own experiences that we were bringing to the group, as opposed to people who were fulfilling a distinct role. Like, for example, I have, since the SoloSIRENs Festival, I've expressed to Jen and Jenny an interest in sound design as well, and now I've begun to take on that kind of a role in the SoloSIRENs collective as well. I just think that's really interesting that we can be really multifaceted in our expression of ourselves as mentees. I'm thinking about something that Ashley said earlier on in the audience panel about seeing women on stage who were really complex and angry and emotional and all of the things that you associate with yourself when you think about yourself as a woman. And I felt as a mentee that I was able to be all of those things, and I felt that all of the women around me were also allowed to be all of those things. I always felt like I could occupy space, and I always felt like there was a space that was cut out for me, and that space was made for me, and it wasn't made for some imagined idea of a mentee. That's a space that I occupied and I was allowed to occupy, and I was empowered to occupy. So yeah, I think something about that would be a distinct part of the process for me.
That's great, thank you so much. And can I ask your co-mentee to reflect on that question as well?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Martha was saying. Something that I felt was really different to any other kind of work experience or mentorship that I've had before was I got to almost create my mentorship experience. in that it wasn't laid out as I started the process. Okay, this is what your role is going to be. This is what's expected of you. This is what you have to contribute. It was just an ongoing creation of the role that I got to have a big part in with Jenny. Like, we'd sit down before and after rehearsals, and sometimes outside or on the phone, and just chat about like what other opportunities there could be in the project, and what else I wanted to gain from it, and what else I felt I could give, and if I had any ideas, and did I want to like plan anything extra. And Jen as well, before the sessions, like we'd sit down and have a chat, and she would ask me as well what I want. And I remember, like was mentioned earlier, I got to like meet Kira when she was joining the project for the first time, and kind of get a chance to like Jen just kind of was like, oh, like Kira's coming to meet us now. Will you just like tell her what SoloSIRENs is for until I get down? And I was like, oh my God. And I just got that, I felt like I was like such an important part of the project, and that I got to like be there for that meeting when someone was coming on board, and like take like a bigger responsibility in the whole creative deliverance of the piece, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes wonderful sense, and I'm really struck by notions of care, the critical framework that you were brought through, the importance of a feminist construct in the mentorship model. And I'm also struck by a sense of the longevity of the relationship, perhaps in the context of SoloSIRENs. And maybe I could ask Jenny Webster to reflect a little bit from your point of view. You've clearly done an amazing job, and I just wonder, would you like to say a few words about that from SoloSIRENs as producer?
Absolutely. Yeah, in terms of our mentorship, I think it was very important to myself and Jenny. We never sat down and formalized this is our framework and this is it. We created something very organically ourselves as we went along, and it's very important to us, yes, to have our own model, and we don't want to try and fit into someone else's model, or certainly ever try and fit into a patriarchal model. We created our mentorship that it was very important to us that it included care, compassion, sharing of knowledge. Believe me, I learned so much from Martha and Michelle, as much as I hope they learned, from us. But really important to me is honesty, and never forgetting what it was like for you when you were starting off. I used to look at so many people thinking, oh my God, they've got it together. They're so confident. And I share with both Michelle and Martha when I'm not having, when I'm having good moments, but also when I'm not having good moments, when I'm nervous about sending an email, when we get a win. We are very, very open and honest, and we share all the moments. And I think that's really, really important. Also, both Jenny and I, we do feel very positively the responsibility of knowing that Michelle and Martha are shadowing us, because we really do believe they are the future of theatre and our future leaders, and we feel that responsibility, but feel it very positively. So it does influence us, if a tricky moment comes along, we sit down and we discuss, right, how are we all going to deal with this? This happens, this will happen you. How are we going to deal with this going forward? And, also Michelle mentioned there the give gain. It's really important to know, what do our mentees want to get out of it? And what do they want to gain? Also, there's so much for them to bring. Like Martha now working on Cesar project as our sound designer. She came on as assistant producer and for SoloSIRENs, and is now in a completely different role. But I think what was really important to myself and Jenny with SoloSIRENs, and I think I can definitely speak for myself when I say this, we have worked with Michelle and Martha since their early teens. And it's quite challenging when you work with young women when they were so young to then go, okay, when do we step out of that kind of sometimes motherly role? At SoloSIRENs Festival, it definitely happened for me then. They are colleagues, they are equals, that we definitely stepped out of that role with them there.
Thanks very much, Jenny. It is truly a very impressive model of mentorship. And I'm conscious we have three very leading important organizations with us today, each offering their own forms of mentorship. And so if I could now maybe ask Siobhan, Mary and Maria to each describe what models of mentorship you offer as organizations, and maybe as you're reflecting on that, maybe to speak to the question of what you think might be working about those models in particular from the point of view of gender bias. So maybe if I could start with you, Siobhan. So I don't think we're hearing you just yet.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Here you come now. Yeah, absolutely.
Hi everybody, it's been a fabulous afternoon listening to all of these amazing contributors that have spoken both as participants, and then to hear from the two mentees has been fab. Just Irish Theatre Institute has two co-directors, they are myself and Jane Daly. And so co-leading an organisation has its own challenges, and I think there's interesting things for you guys around mentorship and leadership when it's a jointly held role. But and how that manifests itself in our mentorship is that in our mentorship schemes, we afford our mentees the opportunity to have one or either of us as their kind of strategic partner, as it were, through the year they're with us. Because our main mentorship scheme is actually our 6 in the Attic scheme. So artists apply for that, they're selected, and then one of the key components of their time with us in the Attic is that they have access to the co-directors for strategic mentorship. And just what that kind of means, we're inviting artists to participate who are at a pivotal moment in their career. So often they are not literally starting out, they have a few shows behind them, but it's definitely an early years moment in your career. And they come into ITI and there are a number of practical supports available to them in terms of space and admin support. There's a staff in Irish Theatre Institute, all of whom contribute to their mentoring in a skill sense. And what they get with the co-directors is really mentorship around who they are and what their journey is going to be in theatre. And we're looking at it in 3 ways. We're looking at it in terms of career, we're looking at it in terms of practice, and we're looking at it in terms of work. Now, it's not hugely structured, and it is a number of meetings that we have with the mentees. And we normally in 6 we have 3 each, and this year we happen to have 4, we have 7, so we're sharing 1 person. And just in terms of gender balance, this year it's 4 women and 3 men, and it's probably always around equal male-female, or it may be slightly more women than men. And we're looking also for a geographic spread. But just to come back to those things of, we're looking for, interventions and conversations, a strategic conversation early in the mentorship on where you are in your career, your work and your practice. So my observations are, what people come, they're interested in doing mentoring because they feel they're stuck in their career. They want to know the next steps. They're still unsure about what kind of work they want to be involved in and what kind of process they want to be involved in. They're still working all of that out. And a lot of it, our role is to find ways in which we can enable these artists to talk about their work. And that is a series of questions or provocations and a lot of listening, where you can ask somebody to talk about their work, who they are, and all the time what you're trying to kind of organically develop over a period of year is that the person begins to understand themselves more, and they understand what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what it is they need help with, and they get some time to reflect, and you're encouraging them to reflect. So when people in the arts, of course, we're all hung up on making work and getting the money to make work, and of course we are, and that's hugely important. But in terms of a mentorship, it's really about that journey over a period of time. And I suppose what we would try to do, our values would be one of trust and respect and kindness. That's the kind of atmosphere we like to create in these conversations. Offer total discretion, which is a hugely important thing in our sector where there's very little discretion actually. And we're trying to also, I suppose, from our own selves, we don't have all the answers. And we're really clear in that we do not have all the answers, but we're trying to find a way in which you can discover the answers yourself through an open conversation with us in these strategic moments. I'm conscious of the people, I probably said enough now.
Well, and I'll come back to you again, Siobhan. Thank you very much. I mean, what strikes me about your shaping of the mentorship program 6 in the Attic is a critically important question: is the moment in time in an artist's career when they can access this level of mentorship? It seems to me that that's a crucial question also. Thanks so much. Mary Moynihan from Smashing Times, could I extend the same question to yourself?
Hi, Ailbhe. And just want to say a big hello to everybody in SoloSIRENs. It's a fantastic symposium and it's great to be a part of this. So thank you so much for asking me. And I've really enjoyed everything I'm watching. In terms of mentorship, I suppose when I first started out working myself as an artist, I was very lucky to have met Deirdre O'Connell, who became my mentor and a friend. And it made me very aware of the importance of surrounding yourself with people who will support you and trust you and work with you. And I think what we do in Smashing Times is we've various, I suppose, different ways of trying to support people. So we do training, which we think is important. And the idea of training is to, you know, this whole idea of power and knowledge and passing it on through education. But what we try to do with some of our training programs is also to support people through those training programs, because people often need additional supports to enable them to access the training and then to stay in the training and then to use the training afterwards. So I find that very important. And we have various professional development programs where we're trying to bring different artists together. I particularly enjoy working with people on a one-to-one basis. And I like the idea of what Paulo Freire says, where, you know, I suppose the traditional meaning of mentor is a more experienced person passing on advice and experience to a less experienced person. But I have found that if you look at it as a two-way process where you are learning from the person you're mentoring, because mentors learn so much from the people we work with. And I think finding that two-way process where you all nurture each other is really important. And I suppose it is about nurturing and care and compassion, and trying to find ways to do that and to share. And, you know, I started off at the beginning, maybe we have this notion of resources are scarce, so we must hold on to them, where in fact, I don't believe that anymore. I think that there are plenty of resources, but there's too many resources in the hands of too few people. And it really is about opening and changing that system. And this idea of bringing people together to share your dreams, share your ideas, share your knowledge, share your expertise. And I would say to young artists, ask people. Don't be afraid to ask. Go and find someone that, yeah, I like that person. Go and ask them, because people are interested in sharing what they have. And just having faith in surrounding yourself by people you care about and that care about you and that you can trust and will support you even when you make mistakes, because that's really important. And making the mentor your friend, if you like, and then working together as you all develop and learning from each other. So that's the way we would like to do it in Smashing Times.
Thanks so much, Mary. What really strikes me there, and in fact it's something that has echoed through a number of people's reflections, is the importance of the one-to-one, and also I think signalling that this really mentorship is an exchange. It's an exchange of knowledge. It's a two-way process, if you like, as well. And that, and it's very evident in relation to SoloSIRENs, as Jenny was saying, that she sees Martha and Michelle now more as peers. So thank you for that. Thank you for your reflections and stirring words of encouragement, particularly to emerging artists. And I do think the question of the system and how it's constructed is a very important one, but we mightn't be able to get to all of that today. Maria Fleming from the Dublin Theatre Festival, could you tell us a little bit about the mentoring programs?
Hi, yes, thank you very much for having me along today. I haven't managed to make it to every session in the day, but it's been really interesting so far what I've heard, and thank you for all the contributions to date. Just one observation, when Melissa was speaking earlier, I remember reading an article some time ago, and as a result of it, I took the word just out of every email that I wrote when she was speaking. That really spoke to me, because I never use the word just in an email anymore. I never go, I'm just writing to ask you, and that's great. I'm also very conscious that I'm speaking here in front of two of my mentors, Siobhan and Jane of ITI. Are the people who have really assisted me to be where I am today. I used to work in the same building as Siobhan, and sometimes she wasn't even aware that she was mentoring me. I would time my tea breaks when I knew Siobhan was in the kitchen and just bring the conversation around to something I needed to know about, and be it like, you know, how to do a contract, how to manage a difficult situation, how to manage a negotiation. And the generosity of Jane and Siobhan to so many people in the industry is incredible. And in Dublin Theatre Festival, the main mentoring program that we have, it's a professional development program, is the Next Stage. And unlike some of the other programs that have been mentioned that happen over a long period of time, this is a really intense. You are thrown into this program for the 18 days of the festival. And there are 18 to 19 participants across all disciplines. It could be designers, producers, actors, directors, writers, who can apply. And when the scheme began, it was started for emerging artists, and it had been running that way for the first couple of years. And then a few years into the program, there was an application from a very established performer, which threw everybody for a loop a bit about, you know, is this for emerging artists? Who is this for? Is it for everybody? And as a result of that applicant who was accepted onto the course then developed, and now you have emerging mid-career and established artists all working on the Next Stage programme. And it's run in partnership with Theatre Forum. Anna and Ailbhe there run it with Dublin Theatre Festival. And the participants for the 18 days of the festival, they see every show in the festival. They have access to master classes with some of the performers or writers or directors attached to some of the international and national work. And we've had incredible professional contributions over the years. They would also have workshops and classes with whoever is leading the workshop. It's been Chrissy Poulter for the last number of years. Veronica Coburn has done it, Joe Mangan. So we've had different facilitators over the years. And the aspect of, because it's so intense, they are so busy. They do so much work. They're going from 10 in the morning until 10 at night every day. They just get Sundays off across the festival. And it really gels the group together. And the experience, I feel, is very fulfilling as a result of that. I would actually love to do it some year. My brother has done it and my niece has done it. And I'm very jealous of people who've had a chance to be part of it. And we know for a fact the impact it has, not just from, obviously we do feedback forms and we get feedback from people saying, you know, it's been career changing, it's changed how they work, it's changed how they want to be. But we also have seen there have been productions in subsequent Dublin Theatre Festival that have come about as a cooperation of people who have met on the Next Stage and worked together and then approached us with an idea that's directly grown from their work together on the Next Stage. So I'm conscious of the time. I could speak about it for ages, but that's our main mentoring program.
Well, it's fascinating because in a sense what it also points to is the value of the immersive, you know, being right at the center in the heart of the festival itself. And I also think what it very importantly points to is that the idea of mentorship is not just for emerging. Like we are constantly learning, and those professional development opportunities and the opportunity to learn with your peers or to be in a position to ask questions of your peers so that you can develop is also really important. So thank you very much, Maria, for that reflection. And if I could ask now, we have also Imogen Gunner as an independent practitioner and somebody who represented Fair Play at the recent European Voices of Culture Dialogue on gender equality in the arts. Imogen, if I could ask you, what's your view of organizations at that level and how they're supporting professional development mentorship, but also perhaps gender balance in the arts in general?
Thank you so much, Ailbhe, and thank you so much, everybody. It's just been an amazing day, and I started this morning by playing some music and ending the day by talking to everyone. It's fantastic. So, just to answer that question, Ailbhe, and a little bit more about that experience last year, representing Fair Play, I went to Prague and then Brussels as part of an EU think tank called Voices of Culture. And the topic of this think tank was gender equality. And what came up as a really important part of this dialogue was mentoring and leadership and the importance that played in creating a space and addressing gender imbalance. So 36 participants from EU countries were put together to discuss various ideas, and it resulted in a report that Ailbhe and I and a couple of other people edited, and it's online. Here it is in hard copy. If anyone wants to read it, there's all sorts of amazing suggestions. But I guess the EU were very interested in what policy changes they could make that would be informed by the voices of people in the arts. And again, yes, mentoring and leadership, and what this looks like. What are the alternative leadership and mentoring examples? It doesn't have to be this pyramid shape that we exist in right now. And I've heard so much dialogue about that today. And secondly, as an independent artist, as a composer and a musician, I really resonate with what I'm hearing about a really organic experience of mentoring and leadership. In fact, I've never been officially mentored by anybody in my life, but I have been given amazing opportunities, mostly by women who have recognized something in me that they think, okay, this person has something to say, this person has something to develop. Let's give her an opportunity, let's help her. So that's the kind of mentoring I've experienced. And then I've gone on to work with younger musicians and creating spaces for, say, like a women's concert series. I haven't even called it that, but I've just made women my focus because I'm really interested in women's music. And I've really enjoyed the conversation that happens between the generations. So I could step back at it and say, oh, I'm mentoring these young musicians, but actually I'm learning as much from them and in making space to hear what they have to say musically. It's really a dialogue, so and incredibly organic, as I say. And in terms of choosing repertoire, I think it's really important to think about what are your sources of music that you're kind of influenced by or referring to, and I'm just naturally really drawn to women's stories and women's stories as present through music. And thirdly, as an educator, so as a researcher and a lecturer, I guess mentoring again, I'm looking at young female musicians often, and I'm trying to make space very naturally because I want to play with them and I want to hear what they have to say, and creating opportunities for students of mine to join me in collaborative pieces of work. And then this idea that came up a lot in the EU report of role models, and how if young people can see that women are very much part of the conversation, that they're part of the dialogue historically and in a contemporary way, that in our curricula, we have to make space in an educational way for women and for women's stories and for women's output and intellect. So yeah, I hope I have so much more to say on that as well, but I hope that was yeah.
Thanks so much. No, absolutely, Imogen. Thank you so much. It's really important to get your perspective as a practitioner and also, traversing, let's say, educational fields and indeed the EU dialogue. I'm also very conscious of time. I'm sure Jenny is going to appear any moment, but there is one last question I would like to ask of the panel, which is, and it's a more general open question, and not everybody has to respond to it, but I'm really curious, how do people feel that we can best support and grow women leaders in the arts? And as a second part of that question, maybe just more of a reflection, one of the key questions that came up at the Voices of Culture was not just about women leaders assuming the leadership models that currently exist, rather the leadership models themselves need to be rethought. So in that context, I'd really like maybe a couple of people to reflect on that question. And maybe actually, I did say to Siobhan I would come back to you, and just because it's clear that the Irish Theatre Institute has had such a strong influence on this field, I think it would be incumbent on me to ask you that question to begin with.
Okay, I'm going to tell a tiny anecdote. In my early years as a theatre practitioner, I had the great fortune to be exposed to the fabulous work of Carol Churchill. We did in Rough Magic, I think, a wonderful and standout production for her play Top Girls. And a few years later, Carol Churchill came to Dublin and at an invitation of Kathy Lee, and I was quite involved. A small number of people got to put through Carol Churchill's process. What I found amazing about it, and it actually speaks to the Claire Keogh paper earlier, which talked the jam session. Carol Churchill's first act of Top Girls is written that way. It was my first time to hear that. 7 or 8 women in a really quick conversation flew over and back. But what her workshop was about in 1987 was power. The entire workshop every day started with power and theatre games around power. And the power that was expressed in the room, both verbally, but hugely importantly, the power that was expressed in the body and how your demeanour carried your power and what it was. And a lot had to do with observation, watching, listening. All her work is about power. And so if I was to say to, voices in theatre and women in theatre, we need to have a really serious conversation around power, both philosophically, abstractly, concretely. When we started in Irish Theatre Institute the work on behalf of the sector for Speak Up and Call It Out, we went through a period where we were calling the entire thing abuse of power. And then it emerged that was actually not the agenda. That's what the agenda, but that wasn't the right response for that particular issue in 2018. And we developed a program called Speak Up, and now a new phase is coming out next year called Act On. But I suppose for a bigger conversation really has to be about power and about how power is mediated. In ITI, of course, there are people have different decision making, but we really tried to run it quite as a flat structure. I hope the colleagues would feel that that's actually what it is like in reality. My own experience, of course, started in cooperatives. I think if you work in a cooperative, I think everybody should work in a cooperative, because in a cooperative, then you get those kinds of experiences around power as well, because of course there's loads of power at play as well in cooperatives. But all of those engagements and all of that thinking about power would really help us as a group, as women, to kind of come forward and find new ways of having conversations around how to run a new system. What is a new system? What would it look like? Would it be better? Let's hope it would be better. We have to try to make a better system. That's it now.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. That's a wonderful answer to that question. And I think in the interest of time, Jenny, if I'm right, I need to probably hand back to you. I'm sorry to all the other panelists, but I do think that thread that Siobhan has left us there, very powerfully positioned and posited with us, is a very good platform to move into general questions and answers at the end of the conference. So thank you to all the panelists. Really appreciate your participation and the depth and richness of your contributions. Thank you.
Just one last thing there, Ailbhe, I would like to add. It just kind of struck me. Yes, you're talking about a young artist for us to mentor, but I'm also just very conscious as well of the young people who have no idea who we are and find it difficult to find us, maybe in marginalized communities, for us all to think about how can we and how can they access us more, especially in schools. We do not have drama as a subject at Leaving Cert. Getting to that stage for some people it is a challenge, so to just think about those different communities and reaching out.
Great, thank you, Jen. Thank you, Ailbhe, so much, and thank you to the whole panel. We are going into the final Q&A of the day. So if the panel can stay on the screen, and what's going to happen is other people are going to come and join us on screen. And we hope as many people as possible will be visible just for these final 15 or 20 minutes. It'd be lovely to see everyone again. And because we're going to be visible, I'll be scrolling through the screen, so you can try and wave me down. We can be old-fashioned about it, but I'll also watch the chat. And again, if you prefer to ask your question live, if you just say live in the chat, then I know that you have a live question to ask. And I suppose it's also helpful because everybody's going to be on screen if you say roughly who you're directing the question to. Are you directing to people in the audience panel? Are you directing to mentees? Are you directing to one of the moderators? So now I'm seeing here, Imogen, do you have a live question?
I'm going to keep it really short. Great. Because I know I'm a panelist, but
that's all right. No, it's good. It's good. It gives people time to think.
I just wanted to talk about this this question of what does alternative leadership look like? What does mentorship look like? And I would just say, I would advocate for people to get together and don't be the one person to just stick your head out on the block and be the person to try and change everything. Get together with your peers, get together with your fellow artists, musicians, and try and make structural changes. And secondly, we have to bring in the men to this conversation. Otherwise, they're just going to keep on doing what they always do. So that's just one thing I wanted to add from observations and from Fair Play and all sorts of places. So I just wanted to ask everybody else, actually, if we were going to think about the alternative, what's the alternative model for leadership that we can imagine?
Great question. What is the alternative model for leadership that we can imagine? Does anyone want to take that question? Anyone want to flag me down? It's a big one. You don't have to have all the answers. You can just have some initial thoughts or some initial ideas. Maria, yes.
So I don't necessarily have the answer to that question, but something that I would love to come into this conversation. I'm doing that terrible thing where I don't answer the question, but
that's
frame
fine.
a statement.
We're into breaking rules.
But this conversation is really reminding me of a moment at one of the Theatre Forum conferences where my predecessor, Trina Niguiver, gave a presentation, and it predated Waking the Feminists. And she was speaking about leadership in theatre and gender equality. And she put up all the stats and, it didn't look too bad in terms of, it wasn't 50-50, but like women were way up there in terms of the numbers. And then she said she did what her father always told her to do, which was she followed the money. And she put the same stats up if you looked at the top 3 paid positions in Irish theatre, and women just fell off the cliff. So I think if we're looking at a new model of leadership, I think one of the things that we have to look for is where the resources are and where the resources are shared. And we might reach equality in terms of the number of women who are on boards or who are in management positions. But until there are women equally in the top paid positions, then we're not looking at equality.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Somebody want to add to that or ask a different question or comment? Was that your hand, Mary? Mary Moynihan? Yeah, great. Go for it, Mary.
Again, trying to define what those models are. I think that's something we need to have a further conversation on. But I remember at the Abbey Theatre when they were doing Waking the Feminists, and somebody made the question, it was put to the panel about this idea of, is it okay to just get women to the top? And I can't remember the name of the organisation over from England that was involved in Waking the Feminists, but they said they realised it's not just about getting women to the top, it's about getting feminist women to the top. And I think that's important, that it's about the ethics or the ideals that we're looking at, particularly around feminism. We need to start by having teaching in our schools, teaching young women and young men about sexual harassment, about gender-based violence, about what equality really means. And then that needs to continue through all levels of society. And as I was saying to you yesterday, Jenny, we were having a talk about this idea of we don't all as artists aspire to be the top of these current male mainstream institutions, that some of us actually choose to work on the edge as outsiders, or whatever you want to call it. We choose to go down the road less travelled. We choose to go into those areas because they're more exciting and more dynamic. And I feel the spotlight needs to move off the current structures to look at the alternative structures. And that means the funding structures, the whole idea of what art is, how we make art, who we make it with, and this idea of finding different models and challenging the current system that's there definitely needs to happen, because the system in a way has to be smashed because it's not serving people. It needs to be smashed. A new system needs to be put in place that brings in class, brings in disability, brings in diversity, all these issues. And what does that look like? Certainly doesn't look like what we have. So even to start the conversation about what it looks like, and I feel what it looks like is what I've discovered later in life, is this idea of working collaboratively with people. It's really, really important. And how do we create those structures? But even in Smashing Times, I would always say to Frida, who works with me, she's the producer, I'm the artistic director, we're a team. We don't, you know, we work together. And how do we create that? And trying to create that, because it's, you know, it can be hard going sometimes to try and create alternative structures, but it's exciting. And that's what we need to do. And I would say to any young artist, trust your instinct. Create your own way of doing things, and let's put the spotlight on new ways and alternative ways. That's what's really important. Trust your instinct on it and make your own way and take power. Okay.
Fantastic. So some great words to move us towards the end of the day and then the beginning of all that comes next. I think we have time for a final comment or question if there is one, but there doesn't need to be. If there's something that feels pressing for someone. I'm going back and forth between screens. Courtney, last comment or question of the day.
Well, listening to the last two speakers speak, I was thinking, you know, following the money, looking at where the resources are, and then I was struck by remembering what Phil had mentioned when he was speaking about this anti-consumerist model. So it occurred to me, like, how within a capitalist structure do we promote an anti-consumerist model when we know that this model is more supportive, it is more nurturing, that it gives, it is so rich in what it gives and what it offers, and yet we're operating within a capitalist society. Yeah. So wants to answer that.
Yeah, it's a great one. And I talked to so many of the panelists about that this week, that yes, so often we want to build our own boat. We're not trying to get on to the whatever is deemed to be the kind of the mainstream ship, because it's not a very impressive looking piece of apparatus. But of course, the tricky side of that is how do you support yourself and what resources come to you when you're trying to do something different. It's a tricky one. Does anyone want to try and take that, or do we leave that as the open kind of intrigue from which we go away? I'm watching you all, and I don't think anyone's waving at me. So what I'm going to ask you to do as a did I miss anybody? Oh no, that would be awful. Somebody had a burning. No, okay. So what I'm going to ask you to do just in these final moments is grab a Post-it note, a back of an envelope, a chocolate bar wrapper, any piece of paper you have. And I'd like you just to think from whatever you've been part of in this day, from whatever you've heard, from whatever you said, perhaps yourself or thought yourself, what is one commitment that you're making to yourself? And what is one commitment that you are making to the field you work in? And the field you work in may, of course, be a home. It might be taking care of somebody, might be your work. There's so many types of work. As Nelta pointed out to us earlier in the day, we don't have to be limited by one job. But what commitment can you make, or are you making to yourself right now? And it can be very quick. It can be something quite simple or quite short. Commitment to yourself and a commitment to the field you work in. That takes us back to that idea we began the day with, which is rehearsing change. So I think we've been in a rehearsal process all day. And before we go off into our own worlds, I just want to make one commitment to yourself and one commitment to the world, to the field you work in. So I'm just watching people to see when they're ready. You may hear from us in a few weeks for an evaluation, and we might ask you to go and find that. So I suggest that after you get off the call, fold it up, put it somewhere important, and maybe in a couple of weeks' time, you'll pull open a drawer and you'll find that commitment. And I always find it useful to remind myself like what I've taken from experiences like today. So again, a reminder that there's an optional 4:30 Zoom call if anyone just wants to chat. And oh, that is perfect timing, Noelia. That has just flashed up on the screen. So if anyone wants to come out of the official event at 4:30 and then come on back in and just say hello to anyone they've seen on the screen today, please feel free to do that. And before we close, there's a few thank yous that I'd like to say. I'd like to thank Tony Fagan and Tala Community Arts, who have supported SoloSIRENs from the beginning. And Tony Fagan has been a huge mentor to both Jen and myself. And I realized listening to Leadership Mentorship that Jen, one of his biggest gifts to us is he introduced us I remember really well him saying to me, I've met this great woman, Jennifer Webster, and we need to have a meeting with her. And so that is mentorship too, knowing who to put into the same room with one another. And I'd like to thank Michael Barker-Caven and the whole team at the Civic Theatre, where the festival happened, and certainly couldn't have happened without space, as we have said over and over today. I would like to thank Noelia Ruiz, who has been behind the scenes all day. I don't know if she's going to come back and give us another wave for the day's end. Yes, exactly. So we realized in July just how big a job this was going to be. That moment, you know, where you go, oh, okay, so that's what we've taken on. So we called Noelia in a panic and said, we need you on the symposium. So thank you to Noelia. Martha Knight and Jennifer Webster have basically lived and breathed this since we had a short break at Christmas, and then it was kind of back in January. At that point, we were planning for something in May. It was going to be live. Then we switched to October. It was going to be live. Then it became October online. All of that, as we all know, and we're all in this right now, it's constant adjusting, it's constant learning. These two have been absolutely unreal. I mean, we've talked today about care, we've talked about love, we've talked about commitment, energy, and I don't know two women who have more of all of those qualities. The number of times I would have a thought and I'd think, oh yeah, it's time for us to get onto this. And I'd call Martha and I'd be like, no, Martha, I'm just thinking, I think we have to start thinking about, and Martha would be like, oh yeah, I have 4 ideas for that. And I've already drawn up a template. So she has just been absolutely incredible. Jennifer Webster, I hope you don't regret going to coffee with me. When I was telling that story this morning to Joe about how the idea landed, and then I called you and I said, I have to talk to you about this idea. We have to go for coffee. So I'm sure you've had a few sleepless nights where you thought, we shouldn't have had coffee. But absolutely, again, another thing that keeps coming up today, you know, it takes a village, it takes a team. There is no such thing as a solo show. So you just have literally my eternal gratitude, and it's been such a satisfying day, and thank you for that. So thank you to Jen and Martha, if we can give them some Zoom applause and love.
Thank you. But of course, SoloSIRENs would not exist without Jenny MacDonald. SoloSIRENs Festival, SoloSIRENs Symposium was her conception. It has been my pleasure and the whole team's pleasure to help you realize this. As your colleague, friend, and as a woman, I sincerely thank you for your passion for gender equality, which I know from knowing you so long was burning in you from a very, very young age. I thank you for that, for gender equality in theatre and society. I sincerely thank you for that. And something Mary Moynihan said was, surround yourself with people who empower you and support you. And I think the SoloSIRENs team has that in spades with you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. So I'm trying to practice, like Melissa Shiro said, I'm just taking it in. I'm just take it in. No deflecting. Now, of course, the symposium has been a conversation and it has been a gathering, and a gathering requires people, and it's really hard to gather right now. It's hard. Sometimes this online stuff is a little, I think we're a little fatigued with it. People are in the middle of their own huge projects and their own adjustments to new restrictions. But people have come together and people have been with us all day and from all over the world. And I find that so inspiring and so extraordinary. So we really want to end with all of you. So I ask you to put your hands together and just rub your hands together and just get some nice warmth in your hands. And then just use those nice warm hands to give yourself a nice pat on the back and go for both shoulders so they don't get envious. So really thanking yourself, you know, for turning up and for your presence and your attention and all your wonderful ideas and your wonderful creativity. And then bringing your hands together again and rubbing them together and getting some nice warm energy there and just sending that out to all the people we've shared the day with and to everyone on the screen. Thank you all so much, and go well into whatever's coming next for you, whether it's a meeting or kids or who knows what's next. If it's a Zoom call with us, amazing. We'll see you in a moment. Otherwise, please keep in touch with us. We will keep in touch with you. Yeah. You will hear from us. And thank you. It's been such an inspiring day. So grateful to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.